All righty. So this is discovering your soul purpose, and I'd like to kind of lead us through this talk today with quotes. In fact, it'll be many quotes will be here to support this topic. There are lots of books you can read, lots of inspiration you can take, lots of philosophies all around that will kind of lead you back to you, right? Are you searching for your soul? Then come out of your own prison. Okay, hold on just a second. I'm trying to let someone else in. And I lost where she might be. So maybe she'll have to rejoin. Okay, so I'll just continue. So I'm a transformational visionary, a mystic, a speaker, and a writer. I am a lifetime metaphysician raised with all things woo-woo, and I, enjoy it now, appreciate it now. In fact, I've been appreciating it my whole life, but I will say there was a time when I was a child that I felt very isolated in my upbringing and teachings, because I was the only, child who had all these weird things as part of my foundation, my philosophy. I literally had a black cat named Familiar. My favorite TV show was Bewitched, like many of us. And yet I had a mother who had me visualize myself getting well instead of taking me to the doctor. And she wasn't a Christian Science. She was just very much into metaphysics. We had a metaphysical teacher who was our so-called family psychic, who actually married my husband and me back in '92 and taught me all about meditation, hands-on feeling, healing, visualization, manifesting, and so on. So that was interesting, since that was the 1970s and things were not quite so open as they are now. Today, I have 4 adult children. My youngest 2 are twins who are 21. And they specifically have said, "Oh, Mom, you need to, go onto YouTube and, not YouTube, sorry, TikTok, because everybody's doing that stuff." They call it that stuff. So anyway, I find it very cool that, hold on just a second. Anyway, I find it very cool that these kids nowadays are interested in that stuff. But when I was a kid, I was told by other children, "Oh, you're going to go to hell." And I thought, "Oh, really? What is that?" And so from there, I have now leaned deeply into my metaphysical upbringing, and, lo and behold, am now a spiritual teacher. I've been doing this professionally for over 15 years and act as a grown-up doing grown-up things that are strange and weird, and pretending to be as human as I can be, which is always interesting. I did lose my husband in 2018, and so that is part of my background, a significant part, because it wasn't that long ago. And 10 days later, after losing my husband, I did lose my mother, and she was my foundation as well as he. And she and I together would teach intuitive skills classes together. And she was ordained interfaith minister, my spiritual kind of, homemade spiritual guru that I could turn to. And so I call myself a perfectly imperfect human spiritual being like the rest of us. All right. Now, in terms of this topic, when we think about soul purpose, we think about our life purpose as well. The purpose of life is to live it, to taste experience to the utmost, to reach out eagerly and without fear for newer and richer experience. So when we think about soul purpose and, kind of like, why am I here, right? That's that very esoteric, basic question, what is the meaning of life, right? And especially when we have hardships, oftentimes we don't go sit there and go, gee, why did I incarnate when everything's going well? A lot of times it'll be like, why did I incarnate, right? It's usually not asked, at least when people come to me for a reading, it's more of like, what is going on versus this sort of like, oh, isn't this lovely? Well, interestingly enough, as much as I would love to believe in purpose in a real noble way, what I have kind of experienced and learned and I don't know what you would call intuited, is that it's much more neutral than we might want, but that doesn't negate the joy and the darkness. It doesn't negate the duality that we experience. It doesn't discount anything that our hearts want for us. But in an essential way, we incarnated to experience life on earth, to have this human experience and to express yourself through the medium of being human, right? If you were part of the all that is, the universe, this whole oneness of everything, it's like, why not experience this thing called being human on earth? Why not? And because we were in oneness in this grand universe of all that is, it got a little bit jokingly, boring, right? It's like, oh, there I am, here I am, everything is me, right? And so why not have this perception of separation of other and self? Right? It's to perceive and interact with other in some way, as well as in a kind of a more, let's say, I don't know, noble, tactile way of seeing our soul experience and incarnation. Is there is a, what I would say, global shift in consciousness, and we want it to be part of this collective movement, right? So it's not just, yay, let's just go see it's like on that planet Earth right now. It's, wow, there's something happening over on that planet Earth right now. There, all these, beings are deciding to wake up and to really experience their grandness in new ways. And so why not experience and be part of that global movement? And to realize your full potential. Now, notice I did not say actualize your full potential. Right? We could actualize it if we want to, but we don't have to. There are no have tos in any of this. A human being is a part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and his feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. And that is Albert Einstein. When we are looking for our soul purpose, now the talk is not, this is your soul purpose. I'm not handing you your soul purpose during this talk today, nor do I usually hand it to you in an individual reading with me, because we are so multifaceted. We are so big that most of the time we don't have a singular purpose, right? We often will see that we want to experience a lot of different textures, a lot of different things. And so it's not as singular as we might hope it is. And that we can say, been there, done that, wasn't that great? And get a little A on our test of humanity. But this talk is discovering your soul purpose. How is it that we go about discovering our soul purpose? So there are touch points that help lead us to that discovery. And those touch points are what we are going to touch on today. Desire, curiosity, exploration, discovery, play, acceptance, practice, and heart commitment. These are not mutually, they're not the only things, they're not mutually exclusive. They overlap. There's so much to all of this. So this is just an overview of ways that you can start to discover that lead you toward discovering your soul purpose. And I will go through each of them. Desire. Your heart's desire is the voice of God, and that voice must be obeyed sooner or later. Unfortunately, I will say unfortunately. And so one of the things that I see when people think about desire or wanting is they often feel guilt, like, raise your hand if you feel sort of like, I'm not supposed to have any desires and I'm not supposed to have any wants. And, it's like it's selfish or it's not godly or, whatever our story is associated with this word of desire or wanting. And if you think about it, the only reason that we are incarnated at all is because God wanted us. The divine wanted an experience different than what it had. And so want is the impulse, the foundation of who we are. And so, and if you think about God got us all that is, it wanted everything. So our wanting of many things is again very divine. Right. So if we can start to recognize this want, this desire as noble, as, sacred, as divine, then it can help us play with it a little bit, explore it a little bit, bring it in a little bit, accept it a little bit. And all of those words are interestingly in this process. So once we have these desires, if you think about a child, sometimes curiosity might come first, and sometimes the desire is first, either way. So with this place of desire, it's like, oh, I want to have that cookie, or I want to do something. There will often become this place of curiosity. By replacing fear of the unknown with curiosity, we open ourselves up to an infinite stream of possibility. We can let fear rule our lives, or we can become childlike with curiosity, pushing our boundaries, leaping out of our comfort zones, and accepting what life puts before us. And again, when we think of children's curiosity, we can see that place of wonder. We can see and experience this innocence that simply wants to touch, taste, know, experience, right? And in this place of curiosity, we can start to be led toward our soul purpose. So if in the picture of our soul purpose, we wonder, what is it that we are wanting? And we start to approach it with curiosity. It makes it easier to move into this alignment. And what I want to say, I'll kind of go back to desire for a second. If we think about, why do we desire to even have a soul purpose? What is it that sort of is fueling that? Well, there are two things, one of which is most of us didn't want to just experience life neutrally. We wanted to sort of accomplish something. We want to experience something. We want to learn something, gain something, support something. And usually it's not just a singular, it's multiple things. So for example, it might be, I want to come down and express my gifts and serve people, or I want to really work out this patterning in my family that was very dysfunctional, and I want to be the cycle breaker. My mom was absolutely one of those people who broke the cycles in our very, very dysfunctional family. And so, check, she was able to do that in huge ways. And I'm grateful for it. That doesn't mean that the buck stops here. It's like, okay, she passed on, healthier ways of being. And so my work is to continue to carry that on for my family, right? That's one of those purposes that she came in with. And sometimes those desires are to sort of more or less feed the ego. And so there's no shame in this, but just being clear that sometimes this desire for a soul purpose helps us feel worthy, helps us feel okay, that our existence is now justified, right? And so when we approach it with that place of curiosity, we are more likely to say, welcome. I welcome whatever might show up for me. Because what if what shows up for you isn't so linear, isn't so humanitarian, right? And that's not a judgment, but what if? So in other words, if you approached it with, I've seen people who, this is one of their first incarnations. And so for them, it's like, what does a strawberry taste like on planet Earth, right? I mean, it can be so simple as to really getting this texture of planet Earth. And there's nothing wrong or no judgment in that if they haven't experienced this in, these incarnations on the planet. Some of us have been here, done that many times on this particular planet. So strawberries are like, yeah, I remember those. I want to do something a little more this time around, right? So again, just with curiosity, we can kind of approach what our soul purpose or purposes might be and being open to that. So when he talks about pushing the boundaries, it could be pushing the boundaries of your ego that might want this really grand thing that we're going to achieve so that we feel better, right? So that we can justify being human or justify being incarnated. Once you have allowed for curiosity, then you can start to invite in exploration. Keep exploring, keep dreaming, keep asking why. Don't settle for what you already know. Never stop believing in the power of your ideas, your imagination, your hard work to change the world. And so again, not to take out any nobility in wanting to impact and change the world. If you feel this inner impulse that you're here to do something big, then absolutely it's that listening to that voice of God, that desire that says there's something here and I do want to tap into that. But that doesn't make you any less perfect human if changing the world means I am creating a beautiful garden in my backyard and welcoming in the butterflies, the bees, and the hummingbirds, right? It's like, why not? And so oftentimes when we're kind of in this place of exploration, we are seeking, right? And what are we seeking may be out there, but often what we're going to find is coming in to who we are. But more importantly, is this taking that initial step to the quest of exploration, right? To taking that invitation of what is it that is calling to me? What might be piquing that curiosity that I want to go play with and explore and discover, right? So just understanding this is that life inviting you to come and take that step toward exploration. And then there is discovery of some kind. And sometimes what you discover is, I did not like that, right? We have a lot of like, nope. We'll have many experiences in life that we recognize we don't necessarily like, chocolate flavor or, experiencing, our face hitting the gravel because, we rode our bike wrong and now we have to learn how to do it better or whatever that is. So certain discoveries aren't necessarily, delicious or yummy, and yet they are, helpful in some way. And I remember once my mom said, I'm tired of learning through experience. I would love to start learning I'm ready to start learning through wisdom, right? And so there are safe ways to discover and explore, and yet sometimes it does take the safety, the safety, going at it in a safer way and taking out the tactile experience can sometimes not be as effective. And unfortunately, as humans, we tend to do things and have these harsher experiences because they sort of sit with us a little bit stronger, and wisdom is lovely, but we kind of like the experience. That's just human nature. So again, no judgment, nothing wrong with it, but recognizing that discovery is, often getting our fingers dirty and digging out, through the rubble. Loving yourself involves the discovery of the true wonder of you, not only the present you, but the many possibilities of you. It involves the continual realization that you are unique, like no other person in the world, that life is, or should be, the discovery, the development, and the sharing of this uniqueness. So in discovering your soul purpose, it's really going to be about self-discovery, right? Self-discovery. And, I will give some suggestions and tools and resources and such. But one thing that was part of my path, especially growing up in a woo-woo household, is my mom was an astrologer. She enjoyed astrology. And so I learned that, at an early age, that I'm a Libra with a Libra rising and a Scorpio moon, whatever that meant. But then I knew, because of all the teachings, what it meant to be a Libra, what it meant to be a Scorpio, right? And in some ways, it's sort of like, jokingly, there were certain signs I learned to have prejudices against because of my mom's. And so I thought, that's not really helpful. And certain signs I'm like, oh, I get along better with these, right? And then through experience, I'm like, oh, that was a prejudgment, right? And so that's an interesting piece. And then at age 13, she bought for my birthday a numerology reading. And so I learned that I was, my heart's desire was a number 3 and, whatever else. And so it was really a place of self-discovery through all these means, whether it's astrology, numerology, or even now they have gene keys. I don't know if you've heard of gene keys or human design or the Enneagram. Those are all fun ways for self-discovery, but not in a way that it pigeonholes you, but kind of like, oh, okay. So when I was a child, I learned, at 13 with this numerology piece that I had a lot of creative forces, and I had, these are the potential things that I could be doing. I could be a teacher, I could be a writer, I could be a speaker. And then lo and behold, I'm moving into these directions, right? These are the things that are my natural gifts. So discovery can mean all kinds of things, but again, it's part of this whole process. And then next is play. Only in dreams, in poetry, in play, do we sometimes arrive at what we were before we were this thing that, who knows, we are. And so it's through play that we get to experience, without as much as we can, the critical mind. If, again, we watch children, their whole experience of life is through play, through imagination, through, modeling, mimicking what we've been modeling for them, right? And if you think about it, how many kids pick up bananas and start talking on the bananas? Or, I saw a cute little meme recently, and these 3 kids were holding a device and looking up and smiling. And they were obviously from a third world country, and what they were holding up was a flip-flop and taking a selfie with the flip-flop, right? It's like this imaginative play, right? And it's not to say that, they're wrong and there's something, that, oh, those silly kids, but there's this juice in that. There's this creative force that is beyond our critical mind that makes room for possibility. And the sad part, I remember my son had a very creative mind, very creative, and he would play and he'd play and he would dress up. He always wanted to be something different. And I don't just mean for the day. I meant he would say, when I grow up, I'm going to be a zookeeper. And so we got him a zookeeper outfit. When I grew up, and he loved to change and he loved to pretend. And when he was about 12, I remember he was dressed up to go fight pirates or something. And he came back and he was just heartbroken. He says, it's starting to disappear. His imagination and his ability to play was starting to wane. And it just, my heart just broke, right? It was like, I'm so sorry, right? And if we can go back to when did we forget about play? When did our imagination start to fade? Because we can go back to those points and start to call back to us those places of play and imagination. And now my son is, a working actor in Hollywood, and he recognizes that all of this imaginative play is creating his reality today, because he's keeping it alive, right? And when we discover something, why not play with it? So if you think your purpose might be writing poetry, then go play with poetry. If you think your purpose might be supporting and helping others, go volunteer in some way, but don't take it serious. And what I mean by that is get rid of that critical mind that judges you for doing it right, doing it wrong. Oh, this isn't my purpose. If it brings you joy, that's all you need to know. That's all you need to invite in. And now acceptance. Acceptance means, for now, this is what this situation, this moment requires me to do. And so I do it willingly. And in this discovery of soul purpose, in this discovery of play and experimentation, there comes a place where we can start to accept, right? What it may mean is, this doesn't resonate with me. This is an old story that I was told. I had a client one time who was actually a friend of my mom's, and my mom, referred her to me. She said, I'm too close. She's too close of a friend that I'm having a hard time reading her. I'm emotionally involved. So if you could read her, that would be great. And this woman was highly successful and made a lot of money and did all the right things. She had a PhD. And when I looked at her, and she was struggling with this lung issue, and I was like, what's going on with her lungs, which we know is grief, right? And all of a sudden I went, oh my gosh, you wanted to be an artist. And she just started to cry. And it was like her whole life was this, push to being successful. Her whole family, everybody had PhDs. It was like, you need to be this kind of a person, right? And she had nothing so-called wrong with her life. She had everything she so-called wanted: the perfect house, the perfect husband, the perfect marriage. And yet she was grieving over having not chosen the path of the artist, right? And what that could mean for her in that moment might be accepting that today she could still take an art class just because, right? It might be that she accepts all the choices she made and where she is, and accept, okay, this is what has, happened. And what is my next step? It's to start to heal and to take life's invitations. Right. And then comes practice. An ounce of practice is worth a ton of theory, Sivananda. And so all this information I'm giving you is just information. It's just ideas and I'm not saying anything that any of these amazing teachers in the past have said to us, or that we haven't read in some book somewhere. I'm just pulling it together from the heart. And the invitation is to play, and then, of course, practice. whatever that might be. And so for me, I don't know if I'm going to write poetry. I don't know if this is what I want to do. There is a thought that, yeah, maybe I'll publish some of my poems. But for now, I just participate, usually Saturday mornings, in a little poetry writing group. And there's prompts that are thrown out, and we have like 20 minutes to just keep writing. Don't think, don't criticize, just write. And sometimes what appears as a kind of a cool poem, and other times like, whatever, right? And the idea is that I keep showing up and I keep practicing, right? And when it comes to what I'm doing, as a spiritual teacher or as a reader, obviously that came from practice, right? And one of the things when I teach people how to access their own Akashic records, I share with them is that I've been doing this 17 years now. I was doing this for 5 years on a regular basis. And people would come to me and they'd ask their questions when I'm in, a session with them, because that's how my readings are based. They're based on questions. And my mind would go, why are they asking me this? I don't know the answer. And I would doubt myself. 5 years in, I was still doubting myself. And then something just shifted. And suddenly it's like, you know what you know, and you are right like 99% of the time, just say it and let go of that fear. And every once in a while, that little will come up. But in general, it's like, here's the information. Here's the information, right? It's not about me. It's about me getting out of the way. And I practice it so much and so often and so well that it is now second nature. That doesn't mean that I don't every once in a while like have these little wiggly parts or uncertain parts, or that I don't pull in new things that I can practice and try, right? So whatever it is that starts to sing to us, that's calling to us, and you want to start to move toward it, then absolutely, just because it's a natural gift. I came in highly awake. I came in a family that taught me intuitive skills as a child. And 5 years after doing this specific practice of Akashic record readings, I was still in doubt, right? And so all those filters, all those doubts, all of that critical thinking and fear was just there anyway. So just because it's naturally who you are doesn't mean that it won't take practice and won't take meeting any of those resistances and fears. And then finally, heart commitment. We need courage and strength, a kind of warrior spirit. But the place for this warrior strength is in the heart. We need energy, commitment, and courage, not to run from our life, nor to cover it over with any philosophy, material or spiritual. We need a warrior's heart that lets us face our lives directly, our pains and limitations, our joys and possibilities. And so whatever it is that you discover as you move toward and ask about and play with and commit to this discovery of your soul purpose, you do want to make some kind of heart commitment, because that's what's going to be that driver that will keep you connected to what that is through the tricky times, right? Through the things that get wobbly. And so with that, I think we're doing just a little bit after the half-hour time, but I do want to open it up to any questions, and anybody who feels complete and needs to go, then by all means, you can go ahead and sign out. And if you have any questions, this is the time that I can take to answer them. And you can just unmute yourself or raise your hand on whatever works. Or any comments or things that have come up. Is everybody feeling complete? I'm seeing your mouth move, Malcolm, but I'm not hearing anything because you're on mute.
Oh, I've said it before. I'm never complete. I'm always on to the next, on to the next. But that's not meant to be a negative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, it's because you're staying open with that wonder and curiosity and keeping that seeker's heart that says, why not?
Yes.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
How do you unblock and then you can actually try to figure out what you are supposed to be doing?
Yeah. So one of the things is that it's a little bit hard because there's this part of us that really does kind of like want a thing, right? Want a thing. And one of the places that I find is that if we have that sort of grasping approach, like I want, it's a lot harder to be open to what might be. So one thing is in that discovery process, if you are interested in astrology or numerology or any of these things that sort of kind of start to like point to certain directions, there might be little, that would be fun. That might be interesting, right? It's going to kind of give you a picture of your gifts. The other place is looking to what do you naturally lean toward and are interested in. One of the things that I see is that most of the time when people are so-called off track from their soul purpose, it's not that they're not, because obviously you can't not be perfect. You can't not be you. You can't not be fulfilling something, right? There's no way. If you're human, you're worthy. If you're worthy, you're perfect. If you're perfect, you're doing exactly what you need to do as you're doing it. And yet there's that piece that says, how do I stay in alignment with what I'm really wanting to do? And that's where that desire comes in. So by feeling into what is it that I'm desiring, right? What is it that I'm desiring? Now, if it's ego driven and I'm desiring to not feel so awful about myself, I'm desiring to not feel like I'm hopeless and I don't have a purpose, that's really going to be coming from this place of lack rather than this place of desire toward. Okay. So going back to that place of desire, it's what things interest you, what things make your heart sing, what things. And so if I go back to my childhood, it's like literally from the time I was little, I loved everything mystical and occult and weird. So I secretly every birthday I wished I had magical powers and I just couldn't wiggle my nose the way that she did. Right. And then what I didn't want out of fear was to do what I'm doing now because that was too weird, right? So there was this part of me that was resisting because I grew up in it. I wanted it. And then I hit my teens that went, oh my gosh, that's not normal. I don't want to do anything weird. I just really, really, really want to be normal. And that did not work out. And so it was through life's happenings that kind of brought me back here. When I say life happenings, I do mean crisis that brought me back to doing this work. So oftentimes when you are starting to go so far from your soul purpose, life's going to call you back and it'll slam you back, unfortunately. So if we listen to what we desire and we allow ourselves to play and move toward that, and it naturally uses our gifts, then that is the yesness. That is that impulse to follow and continue to play with and such. So it's not necessarily singular. It's going to be, let's say, already aligned with who you are and your gifts, your natural gifts, not anything that you have to search really hard for. It's like whatever you do that you don't even know you do that's so natural, that's it, right? It's that kind of, it's so benign in some ways. I remember when I was working, there was a woman I used to work at an actual office, an interior design firm, and I would watch and see the office politics, and I would just say what was going to happen because I could see it all unfolding a certain way. Let's say this person happened and this, that, and I'd say, oh, this is going to happen. And later, it would happen. And then, one of my coworkers said, from now on, when you predict things and say things, I'm going to trust you because you're always right. And I'm thinking, isn't everybody seeing what I'm seeing? I mean, it's so obvious. It's right in front of us, right? But I didn't realize I was just naturally reading people and reading situations. I had no idea because I was looking at life the way I thought everybody else was. So oftentimes it's tricky in that it's who we are naturally, but it's almost like we're looking for special. We're looking for special. And it's like who we are is special. What we're doing is special. And it's a matter of sort of welcoming that. So is there anything else that could help clarify for you?
Yeah, it's just hard to unblock what others expect out of you.
That's a whole different story, right? And so that's the thing, is that it's like that woman that has the PhD. Here she was in her 60s. Her parents were probably dead. And, you know, she didn't need their approval anymore. And yet she was losing a lung over this grief for not living the life she wanted. And so that comes to, that's not about finding your soul purpose or discovering your soul purpose. That's about, you know, letting go of the story that creates that cage that Rumi talked about, our own prison, right? And often they go hand in hand in the sense that what keeps us from being ourselves are those perceived or real expectations of others. It's staying within our comfort zone. And so it's a matter of recognizing, where are we allowing ourselves to stay trapped? Where are we allowing ourselves to stay safe? Right. And so these are more questions to examine versus me saying, oh yes, all you have to do is figure this out and then rip yourself, you know, break yourself free, right? It's like, this is the work. This is the work. And that doing our soul purpose and living in alignment with our soul purpose really comes down to just being who we're here to be, whatever that looks like, without apology, without, you know, excuse, without worrying about what other people think or behaving a certain way. And that's the hard work. That's the part that's like takes the dismantling.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, sometimes, you know, it may not pay well. And, you know, when we live in such a money-driven, you know, world, that fear becomes so real and so great that we think there's no way I could do my purpose, because it would mean letting go of, you know, whatever, any security, right? And so what I do say is that we can always do our practical and keep and enliven and invite in those things that make our heart sing. We can. So this woman who got the PhD, she could have made room for her artistry, right? If she really wanted to. And it's just a matter of recognizing where our priorities are. And oftentimes our priorities are going to be wrapped up in safety, conventionality, you know, approval, right? Any other questions? Or I'm going to put my website in here in the chat, because there's a couple of articles in here, and one of which came to mind. Let me find it. So under the heading Discover, there's articles and writings, and I haven't added any poetry for a long time, but I have one article that is it's called Our Life's Purpose. And it's called Our Life's Purpose, We Could Choose Joy. And so I just put that in the chat. So the nice thing about the chat is that those links are live. And then there was another one that came to mind. Oh, Breaking Free. That reminded me of the first quote that Rumi had offered. And so it's sort of like answering the question of, you know, breaking free from those restrictions. All right. Well, what I found is, I don't know if it's my, it must be my internet somehow or something, but I think my website's really slow lately. And so I have to probably call so there's a whole, yeah, when you click and stuff's not happening. So anyway, so the name of the article, if it happens to come up for you, it's something about like in the search bar, you can go type in breaking free, and it was just like breaking free from our own restrictions. And that gives some sense of things that let's see. Yeah, it's super slow. It's telling me that I can't even find my pages. So anyway, so I'm just hoping that this gave you some direction, some picture of ways to play, to discover, to take the invitation of, leaning into and saying yes to whatever your soul purpose might be. And again, also to kind of let go of this idea, or at least maybe soften this idea that A, it's singular, and B, that it has to be something huge and noble, or else, we're not worthy, and to let it somehow sort of let go of this part about us only being worthy if we have, if we do something a certain way, if we do something so-called right or whatever. And the only reason I want to offer that piece is, for most of us, we've done everything right. If you look at our lives, we've been good kids. We've, sure, we've made mistakes, but we've followed the rules. We've done everything so-called right. We've become spiritual, seekers, story. And we still have life stuff. We still hit those walls, right? So there's almost like this misperception that if you were just good enough, if you were just spiritual enough, if you just did everything right, then everything is going to be okay. And what I found is that many times we do all those things and we're still frustrated, but it's not because we didn't follow the rules or do things right. It's because we weren't really listening to what we wanted for ourselves. And we didn't really take those steps toward moving in that direction. There's satisfaction, not necessarily answers and like, wow, we get rained upon, but there's satisfaction in moving toward that which we perceive as joyful, as worthy for us, that makes our heart sing, etc. So hopefully that kind of clarifies that as well. And the article takes so long to come up, but the name of it is called Breaking Free from Your Rules and Beliefs Can Bring Joy. So hopefully that will also be a useful article. So any other questions or anything before we close? All right, well, I will throw it. The article did come up. I will throw this into the chat as well. And then there was one more article that I thought of, but it disappeared now, but I can figure that out later and add it. Maybe when I put this up on the recording somewhere, I'll remember it. But other than that, it was a pleasure spending time with you, and we will connect. And I do have a session coming up I'm going to have a little break here. I'll have a session coming up at 1:30 and then at 2:30. So I do have a few sessions left. If anybody did want to participate, you can just send me an email and I can pop you in. So there's 16 minutes readings for $56, and they're using the same link. And I would just let you know what your time zone is if you're interested. So other than that, have a good rest of your day, and we'll connect next time.